please welcome to the stage our moderator, Jody Kohner, SVP, Employee Marketing and Engagement, Salesforce. Woo! And our panelists, Mekon Shelton, SVP, Global Inclusion, 21st Century Fox. Paula Weinstein, EVP, Creative and Programming, Tribeca Enterprises. And Christina Jones, SVP, Customer and Trailblazer Marketing, Salesforce.
Woo! Oh my God, the energy in this room is amazing. Are you having fun? Yes. All right, how many people do you think are online right now? 200,000. So, yes. So I really want to just give a shout out to everyone who's joining us online. Just a thank you. There's great energy in the room, but to know that it's being harnessed and immediately put out into the world is awesome. Is awesome. So we have a great panel for you here today. And I thought where I'd like to start, when I have amazing opportunities to interview people like yourselves, I become really fascinated with how it all began. So I wonder if you could talk a little bit about what it was like growing up for you and kind of what were those things that molded you into being such an equality trailblazer that you are today. So you want to start? Go ahead.
Sure.
Yeah.
So first of all, thank you. I'm really blown away by the energy in this room. Thank you for having me up here.
Yeah.
So I grew up in Los Angeles. My family and I came to America from Vietnam and bounced our way over to the Valley in LA. And I grew up very much wanting to be a Valley girl. My parents, in their very well-intentioned way, thought that we really needed to assimilate into what the kind of conventional version of being American was.
Oh, interesting.
And so they really told me, just kind of downplay difference, assimilate, take on the identity. Otherwise, everything was just too fraught and would interfere with our pursuit of the American dream. So that's how we grew up. And I, really tried to do that. There are some things I couldn't downplay too much, but then
you tried for your
yeah,
best
I tried.
girl.
But so then
Okay.
as I grew up and entered into adulthood and, surrounded myself with people who encouraged, difference and encouraged uniqueness, I really found myself coming into my own and embracing difference, and all the work of all the, people who came before in really pushing forward diversity, I think got us to the point now where there's more of an appreciation of difference than ever before.
Yes.
And so I find myself realizing I have to unlearn all those habits of covering identity and unlearning all of the, shame of being different and really leaning into difference as a strength.
Yeah.
And so in my work, heading up the inclusion strategies, I think of how much people have to unlearn bad habits and unlearn maybe what was foisted upon them in society as, images of success and how to navigate difference, and really practicing and building the muscle to, embrace difference. And as I advise executives on the receiving end of that, I, draw upon that experience to say that, you really have to listen for difference, and you really have to, invite difference, and it's not enough to say, we want to hear all voices. You have to do more to cultivate that and to allow that to come to the surface and be a part of the strength of the organization.
That is fascinating. See, this is why I love that question. Okay. Paula.
First of all, I think you're also lucky to work at Salesforce.
Yes.
I'm beyond impressed. I was telling somebody I was watching Cindy Robbins on 60 Minutes, and the idea that you have a woman who is heading HR who says to the boss, no matter how extraordinary he is, I'm not looking and digging for the lack of equality unless you're willing to commit to do something about it. And he was, and bravo to Cindy and to all of you. Excuse me. I was very lucky. I left America when I was 5 or 4, and my mother was a political activist, a journalist, and I'm a child of the blacklist. Not that she was blacklisted, she was named in front of the committees, but growing up as other was not unusual. And I grew up in England, in France first, and then in England. And my mother was one of those extraordinarily fearless human beings. And that was a great example for me. She didn't tolerate fear at all, and in herself, for herself, and encouraged us to not have it. She hired many of the blacklisted writers who had to write under assumed names in order to survive because they'd been blacklisted by Hollywood. And they came up with series ideas which she sold and produced, and she ended up owning her own studio, the first woman to own a studio in England, and really developed television. And she was surrounded by people who were like-minded and activists and who believed in everything great that America could be. Frankly, I would sit with people who had been either the part of the Hollywood 10, which you may know about, or just simply blacklisted and couldn't work. And I would say, and living in Europe as we were, what is your favorite country? And each time out, they'd say America. And I would say, why would it be America? And they'd say, because it's the country of the greatest promise, the greatest freedom, the greatest available change. And they were mostly, of course, children of immigrants or second generation. And then I was lucky enough to come back to America in 1963 and join and be part of the civil rights movement. So what I had learned in my childhood about standing up for what you believe in, I was able to put in practice. And frankly, it was that experience that made me an American, along with the anti-war movement and then second wave feminism. So I've lived through a part of America with great tumult and change. And now I think we're on the brink of something, well, I mean, always have to quote Dickens, the best of times, the worst of times. The best of times I've been instructed not, the worst of times I'm not allowed to talk about, not by Salesforce. The best of times is what I see happening here. And the fact that we are having corporations led by women and men who are willing to really affect change, who feel a societal commitment, who have departments of diversity, and who mean it, who are not just doing lip service to it. Back to the Cindy story. I feel incredibly optimistic and happy, and it's not my nature. So this makes me happy. This moves me, and being part of a movement, whether it's a corporate movement or a social movement, it is the most rewarding. And making movies, frankly, which has that same atmosphere, because you're all focused on something you want to achieve that's greater than yourselves. That feels to me like the most extraordinary thing that you could that could happen. And I hope by 2020 we all come together. I got a little thing in.
Hi. I guess my experience started with I was born in the Valley, but then we moved overseas when I was 5, and my parents moved a lot, so I had to consistently try to make new friends and assimilate, but it's hard when you're young, and so I found solace in stories. So stories and movies and films and books have always been where I found like my peace. And so when we moved back to the States, and my first job was in entertainment at Warner Brothers, but I've always been in corporate, on the corporate side, which means that being one of few is something that I'm very accustomed to. Early in my career, I was privileged to work for Michelle Bell, who's head of creative at Paramount, who is a very strong Black woman, and I realized in my 20s, like, oh, wait a minute, it is okay to be me. I can be a strong, powerful woman, look however I want. I don't have to look like a guy. You know, I don't have to try to fit into these boxes. I can just be me. And that's enough. But then I looked around as I've had a great lovely career in entertainment. And again, as you go up the ladder, there's even fewer. I realized it was incumbent upon myself to continue to turn back and open doors and let more people in. That's how Mekon and I connected. It's important that when you do have a platform, that you use it for good. It doesn't matter like what level you're at. When you look around, you have to say, does everybody look like myself? Am I giving opportunity to others? It became something that became a real passion for myself, and I carried it through my career. And when I was fortunate enough to run into Salesforce, I realized that, wow, this is a company that walks the talk, and I wanted to join so I could participate. And in the area that I'm responsible for, where we tell human customer stories, having an inclusive mindset is really important. We need to tell stories that are reflective of the societies that we live and work in. And the only way to do that authentically is to have a workforce that looks like the society that we live and work in. And so if you have a workforce that is reflective of the society that you have to have an inclusive culture. We're not hiring for diversity to put you in boxes. So that's where my passion is.
Love it, love it. So I think it's really interesting that we all come at something like equality with a different lens, right? And yet I'm mindful that this whole panel is full of people who are in a very creative industry. And so I'm kind of curious to see and hear maybe what are some of the similarities that you can identify with each other about how having that creative lens has enabled you to really use your role as a platform for change.
Well, I can speak to at least the similarity between and what I was so drawn to Christina by. She was so honest and authentic in ways that really seemed radical, like really radical. And when I thought about what are our inclusion strategies going to be here at Fox, where we want to be the studio of choice from the most original and the most diverse storytellers, and how do we encourage that and start from within? And the more I talked to Christina, the more we thought we needed to go really deep within, and not just within the lot, but really deep within ourselves, and start to really model, vulnerable behaviors, opening up, really, being okay.
And did that make you nervous?
Oh, hell yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
right? Like that's hard to do.
Yes. So I started as a lawyer, and I started my career as a lawyer, and I had a very specific image of what that meant. And it was something like Rex Tillerson or whatever the legal world, version of that image was. And I worked very hard to have that image as best I could, which meant, there's a certain guardedness, there's a certain professionalism. You had to always look like you had everything together, even if you had a million things going on in your life. None of that was supposed to, animate any, no place in, how you approach things. And so to then go from that to actually all research, right, all studies, and there are many of them, show us that difference drives innovation, that difference drives creativity, that difference is going to be what sets any company and any person apart, and that allows for change. How do we go from being guarded and curating a certain image and a certain executive presence to actually what is going to surface the most creativity and the most innovation is for us to really open up and be ourselves. So of course that was really uncomfortable because it was a kind of a 180 from assimilating into an executive presence that looked a certain very specific way. I think Melody spoke to this morning, to actually really opening ourselves up and not
embracing that vulnerability.
embracing all aspects and the many dimensions of diversity. And so
have you experienced something similar from that, like how I'm supposed to appear, and then finding that courage to?
Well, there's no question. Everybody, first of all, even the way we dressed in the 70s, and everybody was in Armani suits, and it was a uniform of another or a pantsuit or whatever it was to kind of neuter who we were, and there was always this thing of, am I crazy? I'm hearing this? Has this really, someone really making me feel like shit for a reason? Or whatever it was, where you couldn't figure out what was going on and there was no support. But But you have to understand that for many of us in Hollywood, particularly, because stories drove my life, whether it was a book or a movie, each one I remember where I was when I first saw a specific, so many movies I bore everybody with. Yes, I was at this cinema. So all I wanted to do was to tell stories. And when you are the only woman at a studio, and the studio I worked for, I asked for a vice presidency, and literally the guy who was the laundry somebody got vice president the minute I got it.
Oh my gosh.
And you didn't really think you belonged. You didn't know you'd ever end up in a room like that. I certainly didn't, and none of us did. There was one woman at each studio, and then maybe there was two, and the personal drive and lesson was to not look at to really fight that instinct of competitiveness, and to reach out to each other and say, we're going to be a band of sisters, and we are going to bring people of color into the studio system. And that's been very slow to happen. But the great news is when I look at this generation and this wave, because honestly, my closest friends are women in the entertainment industry, and they are women who were active in the women's movement and who continue to be, and whose daughters are, that we have to be conscious of every move we make. And it's something to celebrate. I know that the young women I have helped to bring forward, it's accrued to me in a zillion ways that I never thought possible. And they are making films and stories. And now I get to work at Tribeca, where 70% of the staff is female. There are no hiding feelings. And it's great.
It's healthy.
It's healthy, and everybody airs their stuff with each other, and everybody works really hard. And we are starting programs so again, we are not simply mouthing the words. We are talking about how do we support women filmmakers? How do we get funding for women of color? How do we get funding for men of color? How do we really reach out and change the voice of the storyteller, the narrator's point of view? That is the way you're going to change, so that young kids like you growing up in the Valley can see Vietnamese women and think there's somebody who feels what I feel and will do what I do. So I'm excited about it now.
I think Mikan's not giving herself enough credit for what so Mikan and I met when Mikan was still a lawyer. I had one of my crazy ideas. I was launching franchise development at the studio, and I realized quickly, like, all the franchise directors are men. How come there's no women? And I had met with Tess from the AFI Film Institute, and so I was wondering, could we change that? Could we create space where these women would have access to these story verses? What would that look like? And everybody was like, oh, that's hard, Christina. And I met Mikan, and Mikan was like, let's do this together. Again, women are unstoppable when we get together on a cause, right? So I think it transformed both our careers in a different way. Mikan got so involved in this, you really realized where your passion was. And when the opportunity to run global inclusion became real, Mikan just stepped into it fearlessly. Like, you went from being a lawyer to driving global, like, inclusion and diversity at 21CF, which is a global company, and made such change in such a short time because it was the passion. It wasn't a normal trajectory. She was at the end seeing the dysfunction, and she wondered if she got to the front, could she affect change there? And the answer is, having been there during your onboarding, it was incredible from the beginning to see the change that she made, and like it's still lasting. So congratulations.
The emotions on the stage right now.
No, congratulations. It is a pleasure, and it was a pride. I was very prideful to say that we partner together and show what can come out of these partnerships when you see something and you go, what if?
So I guess I have to ask, because I'm super curious. So of this body of work that you've done and this impact that you've made, when you look at your personal career, like, what's the thing you're most proud of that you've done?
It's what Christina's talking about, what we started together at Fox. There was
So it
not
was just
an inclusion.
taking that spark and really birthing that whole thing.
Yeah.
That's awesome. You guys have each of you talked a little bit today about the stories and the stories that we tell and the stories that we portray. And I'd like to kind of take that a step further into the land of campaigns and how you launch things and how you launch movements. And what do you think, I mean, particularly for you, how do you get from a point of having a spark, having an idea, and you put that campaign out there and it raises awareness, but like what's that extra something that turns that awareness into really galvanizing people and sparking action and movement?
One of the things that there's a couple things that I'm proud of. Like I have an incredible team. You know, when I started, my team's responsible for the images that you see around the lot, the hero images, and we have not just gender, but also increased our racial equality in these images when we're telling the stories of our customers. What's been transformative, I think, for us is to hear how we're affecting our customers, because our customers are having to think like, oh, I can't just use these same 3 people that I use for everything. Who else is around here that might be doing something interesting? Oh, wait, there are a lot of people that are doing interesting. I just didn't think about looking beyond like the same 6 people that I'm meeting with all the time. And the second thing that I'm really passionate about is, and I could only do this at this company, is, you know, Mark Benioff believes that the business of business is doing well, and any business can be a platform for change. And what I love about Salesforce is, you know, I think we're all exhausted with thought leadership, right? What I'm excited about is action leadership. It's people who are doing instead of talking, and this is a company that does. And when we do, I think it's important that we create space so that we can inspire others to do. And so Make Change is a call to action, and it's a program that we spun up where we're celebrating other people who also believe that the business of business is doing well, and they're using their platform for change. We started with Chef Roy Choi in Los Angeles. We were just at Sundance. We're really excited to be partnering with Tribeca to talk about what's really important as well, storytelling as a platform for change. We had a digital program rollout with Make Change Women that featured CEOs from many of our customers, but also some of our own incredible leaders internally, Stephanie, Sarah Franklin, Cindy, Amy Weaver. Like, it just makes me proud to see that what we are able to accomplish. And the reason that we launched that is because, you know, we go to all these events where a lot of us can sit up here and talk about things we've done and that are awesome. I did this 5 years ago. I did this 10 years ago. I did this 20 years ago. And I was at this event, and there was a lot of women, and I was like, where's the call to action? Like, how come there's no call to action? So Make Change, all of these events and all of these experiences, you'll see always have a call to action. There's so much, I'm not cussing. There's so much bad, there's so much bad news out there. What's sad is that we're not supplementing that with the incredible good that so many people are doing. And what I want to do while I'm here, while we have these platforms and we have this reach and this authenticity and this right, is to create space and platforms where we can celebrate what they're doing in the room, and everyone in the room has an opportunity to make change then.
Yes.
So that's
great. That's great.
That's exciting.
If I could, I'd like to dovetail from the campaigns, because one of the most remarkable campaigns that galvanized people was the Time's Up campaign. And I know you played a huge role in that. And when I think about, like, you know, what that did, it took this Me Too moment, which heightened awareness and, you know, woke up a lot of people. But the Time's Up movement was so instrumental in making resources available and fundraising and offering legal support and really driving change in the workplace.
It was huge, and frankly, all the credit goes to the Time's Up, to Shonda Rhimes and Katie McGrath and all the staff there. We had a day at Tribeca last year, and we are dedicated each year to really taking on a social issue and in terms of the way we program and what we do. So last year we had a full day of Time's Up that was sponsored by J&J, and it was an extraordinary day for women to come together to discuss change, to talk about what their personal experiences had been, and I think they're remarkable. They've raised $27 million for the Legal Defense Fund in 1 year.
Amazing.
And that's available to all women. It's not simply in the entertainment industry. But the point that Christine is making about action, we realized it was vitally important as a film festival. If we believed what we do believe, we had to act and reach out to corporate partners who also are interested in social issues and being aligned with. So we started a program with Chanel for young women filmmakers, and 2 of the films were in Sundance Film Festival this year, which was wonderful, and we've launched their careers. And we've done it with P&G and the Queen Latifah Collective. We financed, with their help, financed 2 young women of color, storytellers, and they'll show at the festival. And what is great is P&G will bring them into their system of commercial producing whatever issues they want to face and make stories about. So it's not simply beginning a career and letting them die. Right? Oh yeah, we gave you money for the film, next. The idea is, how do you keep these women and men working and developing their talent and bring their voices out? Because as we were talking earlier, if a child hears a story or reads a story in which who he or she is represented in a positive way, it is a life changer. And I want to hear from more women. I want to hear from more people of color. I want to understand what their experience is and have their audience come out celebrating who they are instead of all the negative images that, frankly, we've all been part of fostering for a long time.
Yeah, yeah.
So, I certainly love the programs we're doing there at Tribeca. It wasn't enough to program, although I do want to say 50% of our films in competition are directed by women this year, which is fantastic, and 40 overall in the festival, and very high, 39%, but I have to have my glasses and my statistics. I just want to be sure I get it right. Well, anyway, lots of people of color, 39% people of color. So we've really worked hard to, because again, it's very easy to say, oh, well, I don't know, this guy is really great at the job, why can't I hire him? You have to work harder and reach out and do the research and find new voices and then bring them in and support them in expressing the best of what they can by surrounding them with people of experience and mentors. And again, it is the mantra of lift somebody up behind you and have that person lift up. That has to be a daily mantra for all of us, no matter what our position is.
I love it. I love it. Thank you. Thank you.
Can I add to that? The part that
Go for it.
I'm working with the Time's Up on is the behind the camera. And I was talking to Paula about this earlier, because the change I think that we're all after, everybody in this room, right? I think we're going for wholesale systemic change, and that means the whole ecosystem, everybody.
Yeah.
And so we've been very focused on supporting the behind the camera efforts. So we look at all the crew, we look at the reason, right, which is so difficult because that involves changing so much of your frame of mind when you're thinking about hiring the quote unquote best in some category, and you go after credits or you go after, the experience. Of course, the men are going to have more, credits and more years of experience and more, right? We just haven't had that chance. So if we keep thinking of this very narrow view or very narrow definition of best, we're going to proliferate the status quo. So I think there's so much discussion to be had to unpack that idea of what is best for the story, what is best for the culture of the environment you're in, or the production or the crew. And most of the time that's going to involve diversity and bringing in more and different, and not just for the very narrow, and I think traditionally defined hiring term of best. So we're working on that. We're focusing on cinematographers. Because they're the bosses of the crew, so we're going to the most influential position there is. And historically, of all the studio cinematographers, there are only 4% women working in those positions.
Right.
So,
so you've got to really cultivate
But
that.
look at a
You've gotta
movie
build
like
that.
Black Panther, how intentional Ryan Coogler was in every hire he made. Rachel Morrison, who'd made independent films, is the cinematographer on it. She's brilliant. She's thoughtful. She has come to our programs and helped other young women who were wanting to become filmmakers and supported them. But everybody, as they stood up getting the Academy Awards, the production designer had never been a lead production designer, and you got to look at Black Panther and say what an amazing job she did, as well as the costumer. Just because I've always had line producers say no, 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 and it's really no, 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 they're not that experienced. You have to demand it, and I think we also have to demand of the studios that they have real apprenticeship programs, that you have to hire, if it's not the first in line, you have to hire the second line has to be a person of color or a woman, and that is the way it's going to change. There has to be a line item in the budget for that to have it have anything mean. You got to put your money where your mouth is, which thank God Mr. Benioff does.
Yeah, thank God for that. This is isn't this fascinating to get that? We're such all mass consumers of the amazing creative work you put out, but it's really interesting to get to hear it from behind the scenes. So I want to thank you for that. I also need to just geek out for a second and thank you for Grace and Frankie because, oh my God. Like, just to have these brilliant, iconic women who are older, like, crushing these roles, and, oh, I love it. It is really...
They're so wonderful, and they're so
really
wonderful
fabulous
to work with, and Marta Kaufman, who's created the series with her partner, Howard, but to watch them, and to watch, for me, the most gratifying, and for them, I think, we all worked on 9 to 5 together. That's how long we've been
Oh, my
friends.
God, that's amazing.
But
what a shift in storylines. I'm like grasping that.
is the number of young people, men and women, who come up and say, I love the show, I watch it with my father, I watch it with my mother, and the fathers who were reluctant to watch it and are now completely hooked. So it feels great. And
It's wonderful.
Could they all not be more wonderful?
They could not. It is wonderful.
They are wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's really great. So you've got 200,000 people online. You've got 250 of the most spectacular, brightest, and best in Salesforce. If you had a nugget to give all of these people about something that you'd like to see them go and do and harness and give back and put into action, what do you want them to do?
Be active in your world. Be an activist outside yourself. Really commit to community and do something, whether it's taking kids to school or helping at a hospital or volunteering in a political campaign, and most of all, vote, vote, vote.
Yes. I would like to challenge everybody to do something today. Just look inside, look around. Is there something that you can do today to give back? Doesn't mean you can tweet something in support of something. Doesn't mean you can donate. Doesn't mean you can sign up for VTO. Just do something. It feels incredible, I promise you. And hopefully tell the story, and you will inspire others to do the same.
Great.
There's been so much good advice already, and I love action leadership instead of thought leadership. That's brilliant. That's brilliant. That's brilliant. So I'm going to go really, really tactical. There's something that Time's Up in New York, Desiree had told me about, a +1 × 3 action, right? So look at your calendar every week. You know, if you're one of these people on Sunday, you're looking at your calendar for the rest of the week. Is there a meeting that you can bring a +1 to, right? It costs you no social capital. It doesn't, cost you, anything, but invite somebody into the room, if only to observe, if only to start to see what that social dynamic is, the power dynamic, all of that. So that's your +1 on a weekly basis. Look to see who could you bring a +1 to. And on a weekly basis, who could you introduce either your colleague or somebody you're mentoring to 3 people? 3 people that might, be interested in growing their networks, right? It's really hard to take it upon yourself to just always be out there like networking and there are only so many limits to what you could do. But if you can do that for somebody else and you introduce them to 3 people. And so if you could commit to +1 times 3.
+1 times 3. Are we
On
all
a
writing
weekly
this down?
basis,
Can we tweet this?
then,
+1 times 3?
Please do that, and it would make such a huge difference, and it'll be exponential.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Thank you. I have so much gratitude for you women. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you. All right, that's it.